Last week we talked about the way. What we're doing is we finished up the basics of the fifth way, and this is kind of the tail end of that because we spent a lot of time on one of the two pillars of Jesus' way, and now we're spending a lot of time on the other of the two pillars of Jesus' way. And it's just a matter of really getting these two deep down into our minds and hearts and spirits, because without understanding what Jesus really meant by these two concepts, these two phrases that he used, we don't have any hope of understanding his entire message, what he was all about. So what we want to do is we wanted to pull back on all of the teachings of Jesus so that we're not just seeing individual trees, but we can kind of see the forest a bit. We can pull back and we can look at Jesus' teaching as a whole, and then look at these two pillars of his teaching and how he structures everything around them. And of course, the first one is the kingdom of heaven. The second is the way. These two, kingdom and way, are the two pillars on which we need to lay all of Jesus' teaching. And so with kingdom, as we've been talking about, kingdom is a state of being. Kingdom is not a place, not in the language and not in the context, not in the usage. Kingdom is not a territory. It is a state of being, a quality of life, if you will. But even more, as we were talking about last week, kingdom is the experience of life as a sacrament. Ooh, what does that mean? As we always do when we have a sacrament, whether it's Eucharist or baptism or anything, we remind ourselves that a sacrament is an outward expression of an inward transformation. That means the ritual itself means absolutely nothing in and of itself. What sanctifies, what consecrates the sacrament is the heart of the person who brings their full presence to it, brings their transformed heart to it. But the beauty of a sacrament is that it is shared. Can't share that inward transformation, but you can share the outward expression. Now it becomes a communal activity. Now it becomes something that binds the community together. And so living life as a sacrament, an outward expression of what has changed in you. And what happens when you bring your full presence to the details and the moments of your life. And when you bring your full presence to each moment in life, what you experience is the oneness of everything in that moment. You start to see things as one. The result of being able to see things as one, the result of being fully present to your moments, is what Jesus calls kingdom. The kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. Heaven was a polite way of Jews not saying the name of God, but the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven, same thing. And God, Allah, means one. Multiple things functioning as one. So we're talking about the reign of unity when we talk about the kingdom. And it's so important for us to see that. It's all right here, right now. It's not deferred. It's not delayed. It's not heaven or the next life. It's right here, right now. What happens when we start to live as if oneness is real? Jesus said, seek first this kingdom, and all else will be added. So how do we do that? Well, that's the second pillar. The way. The kingdom is a state of being, but the way is an action of becoming. This is what the way is all about. Now, we talked about this in terms of two other pillars, your left brain and your right brain. Remember, we talked about all of that. And so what the way is doing is also to, first is, we're amplifying the right brain. The right brain is the place of oneness, of connection. The right brain is a place of experience without judgment. All right? Jesus is always telling us not to judge. We need to amplify the right brain by living as if this oneness is actually true. And whenever you're living as if, now we're talking about faith. Faith is action as if what you say you believe is true, or at least what you are surmising may be true, and you risk living as if it's true. That's what faith is all about, not certainty. It's action as if in the presence of doubt. And so this active immersion in life, this active immersion in relationship, is what amplifies the right brain experience. This is why Jesus is so strong on loving the enemy. Loving the enemy is the nth degree of love to Jesus, because we are acting as if what we see as separate is actually one. And that's all the enemy is. Whoever, whatever we see as separate from ourselves, can we still see that as one? Can we still identify with that? That is loving the enemy. Amplify the right brain. And at the same time, we need to attenuate left brain dominance. The left brain is the brain of language. It's the brain of order. It's the brain of linear thinking, planning. It's the brain that can conceive of past and future as opposed to present, which the right brain can't do. So we need to turn up the right brain, but we need to turn down the left brain until we start to get into balance. How do you do that? By questioning everything. Go back and read the red letters of the Gospels. You find Jesus questioning everything, encouraging his followers to question everything. Do not stand on what you have been taught. Do not stand on what you have always believed. And start to question the deep existential beliefs. Start to question your own consciousness itself. Start to question the unconscious drives that really are driving our bus. It's not the things that we can think of and put words to that really are motivating us and driving us. It's the things that we're not even aware of, which means we have to do the work. We have to dig down into the unconscious, find out what those things are so that we can bring them up into a place where we then can consciously let them go. So, turn up the right brain. Live as if this oneness is true, and then experience that it is, while you're attenuating the left brain and everything that distracts us, everything that distorts reality, everything that gives us the illusion of separation. The only way that we feel separate to anything is because we conceive of it in our left brain. There really is no separation. That's what kingdom is all about. But we will never experience kingdom until we can move far enough away from the left brain dominance that we can actually experience what that means. And then when you start to consider basic human life conditions, right, we're always going to be oscillating between the way and between kingdom. It's not a steady state. We'd like to think that it was, but it's not. So we're always going to be oscillating between action and this state of being. And when we get into that state of being, those moments, those kingdom moments that we have, where everything is connected, those moments of awe, where sense of self just dissipates and we just feel at one with everything, those are always just momentary. Because in the next moment, there's another choice to make. Kind of how you know you're in a moment, if you've got a choice to make. And what's the choice always? Are you going to immerse? Are you going to join with? Are you going to lose yourself in this moment? Or are you going to continue to think about it, take snapshots, post them on social media, and remain remote from them? We have a choice each moment whether we're going to be in kingdom. Right now, all of you sitting here, are you in kingdom? See, there is the distraction right there. Are you in kingdom, or are you still in the left brain spin cycle, thinking about this, thinking about that, thinking about something that is remote to this room right here and everything that is going on? This is part of the questioning. Questioning your state of consciousness, questioning your state of presence, questioning your mindfulness. Where are you? Do you spend most of your day thinking about things you aren't actually doing? That's left brain dominance. Can you balance that by stepping aside from that and moving into right here, right now, and everything that's going on? This is the way of Jesus. Break it down. Read all of his teachings. You will see it is one thing or another. It is moving us into action that will amplify the experience of our right brain, or it is questioning, deconstructing, letting go, selling away, right? Everything that would distract us from the oneness that is kingdom. And this directly tracks with two other terms that we're constantly using around here, which is mysticism and contemplation, right? So let's think about those two. Mysticism, the four-letter word that evangelicals hate because they think it's something occult. It has nothing to do with being occult. It is the state of being in direct personal union or connection or communication with God, with our source of everything. If you believe that you can be in direct connection with God in your prayer life, in your mindful moments, then guess what? You're a mystic. You're not going to be approaching God logically through your mind. You're not going to just be approaching God through the written words on a page. You are going to be directly experiencing God's presence. That's what mysticism is. It's that simple. Most evangelicals believe in that. It's just the word trips them up, right? And contemplation, what is contemplation? Well, contemplation is the action or the practice that takes us there. Takes us where? It takes us to a mystical experience. It creates the environment in us. It creates the perfect conditions in us. It creates the openness in us that is necessary in order to have a mystical experience, to have a kingdom moment. And so it's the same mix of action as if, which is the faith walk, and relinquishment that we need in order to get the balance that will allow us to be able to oscillate as we have to for as long as we're breathing here between action and contemplation, between right brain and left brain, between the way and kingdom. This is it. How do we do that in contemplation? Well, it's the 4 S's again, right? Silence, solitude, stillness, and simplicity. To practice those things in all the different ways that we do, whether it's meditation, whether it's centering prayer, whether it's mindful experience. It could be journaling. It could be sensory walks where you just completely embed yourself and immerse yourself in the sensory experience. But all of these activities of contemplation are what are setting the stage for, setting the environment for us to be able to lose the sense of self that we need in order to be able to experience God directly as one, as we, as one with. And if we do that, what is the result of the practice of contemplation? What is the result of traveling the way that makes kingdom and a mystical experience possible in the first place? It is going to be, over time, a growing awareness. You are going to become aware that your awareness is growing. You're going to become aware that your awareness is catching up to you. It's not just looking back years when you realize how you were so out of touch and so disconnected, or last year or last week, or the conversation you just had that you weren't present for. But your awareness will actually catch up to you in real time, where you can be aware of making choices that will keep you connected and keep you in the moment, in the kingdom, one with, and not allow yourself to be distracted. It is this growing awareness that allows you to have a growing sense of presence, to be more and more present in everything that you do. It is a consistent stripping away of all that left brain activity that distracts and distorts and creates this illusion of separation. And to realize how superfluous most of the things that we constantly think about are, that they just don't matter. But they certainly limit us, don't they? It's like how many of you ever wake up at 3:30 in the morning? And by the way, why is it always 3:30? I mean, I wake up and it's 3:30. It's 3:30. What is it with 3:30? There's something weird about that time. But you wake up at 3:30, it's pitch black, you're laying in bed, you're kind of in this disembodied state, right? Maybe you woke up out of a dream and it takes you a while to even realize where you are and what was dream, what's reality. But everything that it means to be you is somewhere out there in the dark, right? Your clothes are in the closet. Your Rolex is on the nightstand. Maybe your teeth are in the bathroom. Your cars and your tools are in the garage. Your diplomas and all your certifications are on the wall at the office. Everything that you have worked so hard to be able to project you as yourself is somewhere else. Even the people in your life that define your roles or reflect back to you who you are, And even if there's one lying right next to you in the dark, they seem remote at that time. They're no longer defining you. They are no longer aiding in the projection of yourself. And so naturally at that time in the morning, the questions start arising, don't they? You know, you start questioning everything. You start running all the tapes and all the what ifs, and everything often just seems to run to a fever pitch. All these unanswered questions, all the things that you don't know. Who are you then at 3:30 in the morning in the dark? What in the world are you doing? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? And then in the morning, the sun comes up, it gets light, and you make up the coffee, and you feel better. Why? Because your clothes are back on, your Rolex is back on, your teeth are back in. I mean, all the things that mean to you, are now around you again. They have reinforced your presence, understanding yourself as this projected self, right? What is contemplation? Contemplation is the intentional, conscious remaining in the hot seat, remaining in that 3:30 a.m. disembodied state, remaining in the place where you actually are quiet enough to continue to ask the questions that need to be asked and not running back to the construction that you have created, but to allow yourself to move into, and there's nothing else to call it except the wilderness. That's where Jesus went. That's where everybody of faith goes. Go to the wilderness and stay there on the hot seat long enough to ask the questions, to let everything that we've built about ourselves become transparent enough that we can see right through them to the central existential questions of life. We don't see them, we don't think about them as long as we're filled with all our distractions, with all our stuff. But lay the stuff down long enough and see what comes to the fore. Francis of Assisi is famous for spending all night long in his prayer, asking two questions over and over and over again as a mantra almost. He would ask, who am I, Lord? And who are you? Who am I? And who are you, Lord? Two more pillars, right? Two more pillars of the human consciousness and human experience. Two questions. Who are we? Who and what is God? What is the ultimate source of reality that we're dealing with here? And who are we? How do we fit in to that reality, to that ultimate source of everything that is? Now, Descartes had an answer for that, right? Cogito ergo sum. You've heard that one before, I'm sure. Usually translates, I think, therefore I am. But really, if you think about what he's talking about here, he's really talking about consciousness. I think means that we are conscious. Consciousness is really all we have. Consciousness is all we are. And yet, what is consciousness? Do you know that nobody knows? Nobody can tell you what consciousness is. Not the theologians, not the physicists. Nobody. Whether they're scientists or whether they're theologians and coming from a spiritual or physical point of view, nobody can actually tell us what consciousness is. Now, we can say that it's awareness of self, self-awareness. It's being aware of ourselves. It's being aware of our own awareness, like two mirrors facing each other, right? We can say that that's what it is. But what does that even mean? When it comes right down to it, especially when you're staring at the ceiling at 3:30 in the morning, what does it mean to be aware that you're staring at the ceiling at 3:30 in the morning, thinking thoughts in your mind that either define what you think you believe or are questioning everything? What is consciousness? How does it come to be? What else is conscious? Is there anything else that's conscious, or is it just human beings? A lot of people think plants are conscious. A lot of you think your dog is conscious. Your cat, I'm not sure about cats, but your dog may be conscious. There's a possibility there. Do we generate consciousness? When our left brains get to a certain point, do they generate the consciousness, the self-awareness? Or do they just get to the point that we can receive consciousness that is already there? Are we simply receptors of some vast universal consciousness that we would call God? Are we emanations of God in a human egoic container for a period of time, a short period of time, that collects data and then returns? Nobody can answer these questions, but there's all these tantalizing reasons and thoughts behind it. But here's the catch. We can go down that rabbit hole as far as you want to go, and we can really lose ourselves in all of those details and all of those what ifs, and lose the forest if we're not careful. We can become disconnected from daily life if we spend all our time running around esoteric trees in our forest. But kingdom, as Jesus taught it, it's all about daily life. It's all about these specific encounters and experiences that we have. It's about spiritual awareness immersed in physical moments, in physical relationships. Jesus never takes these esoteric trips and speaks in abstract terms and continues to spin around the clouds. He brings everything down to earth. He connects everything to daily experience that everyone is familiar with. And this kingdom, this way of Jesus, absolutely recognizes that you can't separate the spiritual from the physical. As long as we're breathing here, we're always going to experience our spirituality through our physicality. As long as we're driving while human, right? We're going to be experiencing the spiritual in the physical. And if we don't, if we try to separate the two, we're going to do violence to both, because we won't be able to experience or understand either one. The kingdom and the way of Jesus are intimately and inextricably linked and tied to this present moment, the physical relationship that you're having right now. You're never going to be able to experience kingdom anywhere else. It's like a fish in water. The fish needs the water. We need the air that we are in. We aren't going to experience what it means to be a fish out of water, and we're not going to experience what it means to be a human apart from the atmosphere that sustains us. We can only practice the way. We can only practice contemplation, and we can only experience kingdom and mystical connection in this physical moment. And here's a test, if you're wondering, right? If there isn't any effect on your present moments, if there's no effect on your physical relationships, then for you, kingdom does not exist. Kingdom is the effect. And that's a shameless plug for our church. Kingdom is the effect. The effect of God's love, the effect of the identification with oneness of God in our lives, that inward transformation creates an outward expression. That outward expression that we don't have to coerce, we don't have to think about, it just will happen, is kingdom. That's what it is. But it's tied to this moment, right here, right now. We can't let our spirituality become untethered from our physical lives and our physical moments, or we will lose both. And Jesus knows this. He teaches this. He models this. Always, everything that he does is bringing this, not esoteric. You know, Wednesday we had a kind of an esoteric conversation with the book that we're studying, and it got out into, kind of the cosmos a bit. And at the end, she who will remain nameless said, could we just have a practical life application for this? Is there a way that we can apply this to life? And that's perfect. Everything that we talk about in here, I'm always trying to connect it, just one-on-one to something that applies to life. And this is what we always need to do. And so how does all of this, how does kingdom, how does the way, how does Jesus' teaching apply to daily life? Now, you'd think it would be in the Gospels, right? Shouted from every rooftop if this is the actual connection, but here's the rub. Jesus, as we've said so many times, is a poet. He's a poet. He's not a systematic theologian. We want him to be a systematic theologian so we can get everything down in triplicate and all, the executive summary and the cliff notes. Jesus doesn't work that way. He moves from experience to experience. He moves from metaphor to metaphor because he knows, and any spiritual teacher knows, you cannot put spirituality into words. It is not a left brain phenomena. You're only going to experience it through the right brain. And so metaphor and figurative and poetic speak is the only way that you're going to get an evocation of what's across, to simply evoke this. Jesus is a poet who is living life as a sacrament, not a systematic theologian. Now, the Sermon on the Mount is probably the closest that we get to any kind of systematic expression of Jesus' teaching. But we know that that was compiled by the writer of Matthew years after, because all those teachings are scattered across Luke's gospel and other gospels in different settings. But somebody tried to bring his teaching together, and the Sermon on the Mount was most likely used as a catechism for early believers in the first century. So it functioned that way. But where can we go to for help? Where can we go to start to understand what it is? What are the workings of the way that we can lay down that can help us to have a roadmap, a framework for how to behave? If we are going to try to attenuate the left brain dominance and amplify the right brain, what can we do in life to start making that a reality? And here's where I think we can get some help from a completely different tradition. How many of you are familiar with the Stoics? Okay, we got some Stoic people here. All right. So it really doesn't have anything to do so much with what we think of a Stoic person, someone who just grins and bears it and gets through. The Stoics it's a school of Greek philosophy that was started probably about the 4th century BCE. Zeno of Citium is the one who is credited with starting it. But probably the 3 most famous Stoic philosophers that we have heard of and whose writings are available to us would be Seneca, who was a Roman statesman and a playwright, a dramatist. And then we have Epictetus, who was actually a Roman slave, granted his freedom and started a school of philosophy until he was thrown out of Rome by Nero. Nero's always a roadblock for people, it seems. He killed Paul. He made Seneca commit suicide during his reign as well. And Seneca actually taught him as a boy, so there you go. Stay away from emperors. Epictetus was thrown out by Domitian. All philosophers were thrown out because he thought that they were subverting his power. And then finally, Marcus Aurelius, who's really kind of an anachronism. What do I want to say? He's ironic in the sense that he was a Roman emperor and one of the good 5 emperors of the late Roman Empire. But these 3 really codified what the Stoics were all about, what they believed. And here's the thing about Stoicism. It's a deeply practical philosophy. It is not esoteric. It's focused on daily ethics, on self-discipline, emotional regulation, living in agreement with nature rather than abstract notions. Ancient and modern practitioners use its core tools to navigate hardship, manage destructive emotions, and focus their energy on things they can directly change. They believe that living a good and happy life requires focusing only on what you can control and accepting what you cannot. It's interesting, but Stoicism directly was the inspiration for cognitive behavioral therapy in the modern era. So CBT relies on, and if you look at CBT exercises, if you've ever been through it, you're going to recognize it all in Stoic practices because that's where it came from, And the principles that guide Stoics are those that guide our choices and our attitudes and our experience in daily life, which create a sense of identity for us, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. And Stoicism, for my money, along with Taoism from the Chinese tradition, are the closest to Jesus' teaching once we have taken Jesus back into a first century Aramaic context. We have stripped away all that Western Christianity has added on what Jesus is teaching lines up so well with Stoicism and also with Taoism. And so what I wanted to do quickly today is go through 8 core principles. And if you have your inserts, it would be good for you to follow along with them. And to get that reinforcement visually as well as orally. But take a listen to these 8 core principles, and let's just see how this may help us to have a roadmap for the way. First one, when you are offended, remind yourself that you were complicit in taking offense. That's by Epictetus. You were complicit in taking offense. Whatever someone said or did, you chose to be insulted. You chose to be hurt by it. Unless it changed who you are, and no one has the ability to do that, it didn't affect you. It is nothing. We talk about unoffendability in here all the time. Unoffendability was one of the highest virtues of the early church, and we have completely lost it. Now you would think the highest virtue is to be offended and to defend your offendedness. That's not it. To be unoffended. You know, there are some wonderful stories from the Desert Fathers, who are the early Christians that fled out to the deserts of Egypt. And one of them I've told over and over, but just to refresh, a young monk goes to the elder, how can I get closer to God? He says, go to the graveyard and insult the dead. And so he goes and he yells at headstones, comes back, did you go to the graveyard? Yes. Did you insult the dead? Yes. Did they respond to you? Well, no. And now I want you to go back to the graveyard and praise the dead. And he does the same thing, comes back. Did they respond to you? No. He says, when you can respond to the insults and praises of men the way the dead do, you will be closer to the Lord. It's all about left brain attenuation, right? Letting go of all the things that we set up as preferences and aversions and all the things that we defend about ourselves. This is what it's about. Take a look at Proverbs 12:16. Prudent people overlooked insults, while fools react immediately. And then from Jesus at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. See, this is Jesus telling us. You see the otherness in the person, and they have created that otherness by their opposition to you, by their insult to you, by their persecution of you. But connect with them anyway. See them as an extension of yourself anyway. See them as a person at a different point on the continuum of the way. And everything changes. Your whole experience of life changes. What would your life be like if you could just let go of your offendability? How would that change things? How would you now be able to let the opinions of others be just their opinions that are revealing things about themselves, but nothing about you, nothing about your reality? How many of you have read the 4 Agreements? Okay, this is about Toltec wisdom, right? But what is the second of the 4 Agreements? Don't take anything personally. It's the same thing. And really, if you think about the 4 Agreements, the first one is be impeccable with your word. The second is don't take things personally. The third is don't make assumptions, which is really a subset of don't take anything personally, isn't it, really? And then the last one is always do your best. These are right in line with the Stoics. These are right in line with Jesus' teaching. Wisdom is wisdom. It's called the perennial wisdom for a reason, because it underlies all of human experience. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't consider constructive criticism, of course. And if someone does insult you or come against you, run it through the filter. Is there any truth to that? Obviously, we need to grow. But if it's just a matter of name calling and it's no substance, then it's got to be their opinion. And we can move along. Respond as the dead do to the insults and praises. Praises are important too. Second, of all the things happening in the world, only a tiny bit of them are in your control. Wow. Can we at least start to recognize that? Recognize which are which. Practice acceptance. What the Stoics call the art of acquiescence. The world does not revolve around you. You don't control what happens, but you do control how you respond. I tell people all the time, you get your emotions for free. Don't feel guilty of your emotions. Don't feel guilty when you're triggered. You have no control over that. That which you don't have control over, you are not responsible for. But you are responsible for what you do with that trigger, with that emotion. And you are responsible for how you react in all of these ways. At Matthew 5:36, also Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Nor shall you make an oath by your head." They used to make and swear by their head or the temple or the gold of the temple, anything to avoid swearing by God. He says, don't do that. Don't make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. The most basic things in life are beyond us. We can't affect them. This control that we run around thinking we have is illusion. There is so little that we can actually control. We can't control outcome. We can control discipline to a process. That's about it. And if we are disciplined to our process, at least statistically, we're going to get some good outcomes out of that. But any one outcome is never in our control, and yet that's what we focus on. What can you control? What can't you control? Now, James 4:13 and 14. I didn't have room to put that in the inserts, but Brian's going to throw it up on the screens. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet, you don't know what your life will be like tomorrow. You're just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. We make all these plans. We think we're going to be around to fulfill them. We think everything that we plan for, every contingency, is going to work out well. No. We don't have that kind of control. What is the serenity prayer about? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. If we can't do that as a baseline, how are we ever going to get past the things that are really affecting us? We have to know what we can control and what we can't. We need to learn to accept life on life's terms and yet still live with a sense of hope and gratitude. We can't do that without the serenity of acceptance, the art of acquiescence. This is huge. How much would your life change if you could just do this much? If you could, when something hits you, first run it through the ringer. Is this something that I have any control over? If not, put it on the shelf. What are you going to do? If you do have some control, do I have any control over it right now? If so, exercise that control. If it's something later, then write it down in your day planner and get to it when you get to it. This would change everything about the way we go through life. It would change our expectations of life. Somehow we expect that we're supposed to have control. We expect that we are going to be in control of our outcomes. But if we can get to this place of acquiescence, we can change our priorities. In our personal relationships, we can realize we can't change the other person. Why are we spending all this time trying to do that? Why are we so frustrated with them because they won't comport to our standards? And how about all of this residual guilt that we have for things that we've done in the past? Can we change those? Do we have any control over that? Well, then what's the proper thing to do? Learn from it. Try not to do it again, but let go of the guilt. What in the world is that doing for you? Except limiting everything. This is the way to humility. This is the way to recognizing our powerlessness. It's the first step of the 12 steps for a reason. Without that recognition, we cannot go forward. We won't know what we can and cannot do. What we're trying to get to is a fearless dependence on God, on the source of everything, in the face of everything we can't know and everything that we can't do. Number 3, you're going to love this one. He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than it is necessary. That's our Seneca for us. Don't torture yourself with anxiety or catastrophizing all the bad things that can happen. Stay in the moment. Matthew 6:27, still in the Sermon on the Mount. Who of you by being worried can add a single hour to his life? Sometimes you'll see that translated, adding an inch to your stature, to your height. Actually, the words can be translated either way, so both of them are right. But you get the point, right? And then skipping ahead to verse 34, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Of course. Yes? Think about how much brain bandwidth is taken up by worry in your life. How much time do you spend thinking about the future and all the things that can happen and trying to plan every conversation, everything? That constant planning, that constant risk management, that constant catastrophizing, all time spent that is not spent in the moment. This is what takes us out of the moment. This is what makes a perfectly beautiful moment that is enough for us seem like absolute torture. It's not the moment. It's our experience of the moment through the filter of our worry, of our catastrophizing, of staying in the left brain, spinning over and over and over. The left brain is the way it is for a reason. It's tied to the past because it needs to remember for quick recall that will help us to survive moments in our presence. We need that. But when there is no clear and present danger, what the heck are we doing? You know, we're just running and running and running. That sympathetic nervous system is constantly taking us into fight or flight, and we can never get off that bandwagon. And if we're not here now, then we're nowhere. And so we want to stay in the moment. Number 4, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius. The impediment to action advances action. The obstacle is not in the path. The obstacle is the path, right? Why? Because it's giving you the chance to do things differently in a way that you wouldn't have chosen. But that ultimately makes you better for having wrestled with it. Why are we here? We're not here for everything to go right. We're here for everything to go wrong, and then we work out how to get through that. That's how we grow. Everything that we surmount, everything that we overcome makes us stronger, but it teaches us something. What is a hero's journey all about? It starts with a wounding. A wounding is just finding out the world isn't what you expected it to be or wanted it to be, that it hurts. That, if you accept the call, sends you on a path where you've got all these tasks that you have to complete. Every one of them is a trial and a challenge. And every one that you complete allows you to come back to where you started and have something of value to offer to the community that didn't exist before in you, because you hadn't gone through this. The obstacle's not in your way. It is the way. It's the whole reason for the season. Take a look at Romans 5. Starting at verse 3. And not only this, but we also exult in our tribulations, Paul says, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance, proven character, and proven character, hope. Or James 1, starting verse 2 and 3. You don't have this one on the screen. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have a perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. The trials, the challenges, the tribulations are why we're here. It is the substance of life, from our first breath to our last. If we learn to expect that of life, it changes the whole calculus. Every obstacle, every challenge is not God raining down some sort of retribution on us. We are no longer cosmic victims, but we are students that are learning from everything. And yes, trauma is horrible, and it's nothing that we would ever want. Give yourself the grace within the traumatic event, in the midst of your grief, to be grieved, to be put down for a time. But as soon as you can get back up and look past your pain again, then it's, am I a victim or am I a student? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How do I put things back together again, accommodating this changed landscape and this hole in my chest, but to carry on with something that I didn't have to carry on with before? Number 5, it's impossible to learn that which you think you already know. Epictetus. Ego is the enemy. It prevents you from learning more, hearing what you need to hear, seeing what you need to see. 1 Corinthians 8:2. If anyone supposes that he knows anything, he is not yet known as he ought to know. I love that. I finally realized that anytime I thought that I had come up with an original idea, I just hadn't read enough. It's out there someplace. Come on. There's nothing new under the sun. Get your ego out of the way. Matthew 16:24 and 25, not in the inserts. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. In other words, the more you hang on to what you think you know, the more you hang on to this life that you have constructed, the more you will never be able to see what is really here in front of you right now, who you really are and were created to be. Who you think you are is a construct. It's the matrix. It's what you have created out of all the necessity, out of all the hurts and abandonments and everything that we need in this life in order to have advantage and to move forward. But it's just a construct. Take all that away at 3:30 in the morning and you have a clearer shot at seeing who you really are. But if you think you already know something, you can't learn anything new. Question everything that you think you know. Be willing to let go of everything that you think you know. You don't need ultimately to let go of everything. You got some good stuff in there. But how will you know what is or is not limiting until you're willing to let it all go? This is the point. This is the process. It's so basic. It's almost a platitude. But the trick is always going to be becoming aware of everything that you think you know. Everything that you assume to be true. Don't make assumptions. And realize that what you think you know is like an iceberg. The top part is your conscious knowledge. The bottom is all that unconscious that you don't even know, that you don't even know that you believe, because it got put in there before you even had access to language, much of it. Most of what we think we know, most of the beliefs, core beliefs that drive us are unconscious. And we've got to be willing to question everything and then dig deep, go through the process of bringing up what we don't even know is driving us, so that we can get past that as well. Let that go, relinquish that, so that something new can come in and take its place, so that we can even see that there's another there. 6, the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Marcus Aurelius again. Our life is colored by what we think about. If we see everything as awful, sad, gloomy, impossible, it will look that way. Do you see the obstacle as an obstacle, or do you see it as an opportunity? Philippians 4:8, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence, and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. This is also a function of awareness. How much of the internal narrative in your head is negative? Be honest. When you find yourself not thinking about the thing that you're actually doing and you're spinning on something, how often is it negative? It's almost always. But why? Of course it is. We're not going to obsess over the things that are good. We like those things. We're going to obsess over the things that we think we don't have, the things that we think we need, the things that we have been frustrated about, the things that hurt us. Those are the things that we obsess over. And that constant negative internal narrative is what is driving all of this. Realize that. If you don't realize how much everything defaults to the negative, we're going to have this skewed view of life. And it requires a constant energy, a constant intentional push to focus on the positive, because it's not our default position. The current's running the other direction. We got to swim upstream. We got to become salmon in order to do this, especially to do it with gratitude. But monitor the quality of your thoughts. What are you thinking about? And how much of that negative that you're thinking about is actually real? Especially if you remember the first one, not to take things personally. Don't be offended. Number 7, it's not what happens to you. It's how you react that matters, Epictetus. It's about what you do with it, what you make of it, who you become because of it. Philippians 4:11, not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. Our sense of happiness, our sense of fulfillment and completeness, meaning and purpose, is never in our circumstances. We live our lives as if they are. We focus all of our agenda as if they are. but it's not in the circumstances. A choice is what we make regardless of circumstance. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said most people are as happy as they choose to be, something like that. Now, trauma, of course, is never happy. But even then, we can move through and we can look at the encounter, look at the event in a different way. How do we think about this? How do we react to it? What comes from it? What you meant for evil, God meant for good, right? Joseph and the whole situation with his brothers. A sinner is just someone who fell down and got up again. Something like that. That was a song I remember just that came in my head. It's the same thing. What are we going to do? How do we react to the things that happen to us? We only classify them as good or bad because they have frustrated our agenda, our outcome. The outcome is not important. It is the process. Life is all process. It's never an end. It's all means. It's never an end. Can we start to refocus that way as well? And then finally, maybe the most important, memento mori, which is Latin for remember you're going to die. How about that? Every person born will die. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Marcus Aurelius again. And Seneca said, tell yourself, I may not wake up tomorrow when you go to bed. And say, I may not sleep again when you wake up. These reminders of mortality are essential to living life to the fullest. It seems morbid to think this way. It's anything but morbid. Luke 12, verse 19, and I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now, who will own what you have prepared? We've got to realize that we are mortal. We live most of our lives as if that weren't true, as if that weren't the case. This is the greatest teacher of all, if we will let it be. Did you know that Roman conquerors, when they were returning back after their conquest abroad, returning to Rome, they would ride the chariot with all their finery and their gold and their purple, and they would have a slave behind them that would say, you're just a man, you're going to die. It was a formal ritual that was pointing to the need for humility, for them not to move into this idea that they were some kind of gods, because that's what it looked like from the people's perspective. Life is about supply and demand. What's supply and demand? The more we have of something, the less we value it. The less we have of something, the more we value it. Life is precious to us because it's finite. And when we realize how finite it is, how short this time is, it makes it more and more precious, not less so. And of course, death is a part of life. Everything that is born dies. Can we incorporate that as a positive, as a remembrance that this moment is precious, because we never know if it's our last one? I mean, that's the test, right? If this were your last moment, what would you do with it? Well, why aren't you doing that now then? Memento mori. Remember death. Any moment could be our last. And now we can let that fill us with fear and anxiety if we want, or we can let it fill us with wonder, with presence, and with gratitude. But a life lived without considering death is a life that is not lived at all. It is a superficial life. All of these principles together, all of them are echoed in Jesus' way, in his teaching. All of them are taught by Jesus, both from him and from his followers, as we read today. If we can look at this list, see how we can incorporate this into our daily lives, our choices, how we can use them to refine the way that we go about experiencing what we experience, how we can go about checking the narrative inside and seeing how it is affecting everything day by day in the daily details of life. Keep this going. until it becomes muscle memory, until it just becomes a part of who we are. It becomes our default position that we will be living life this way as opposed to the way that we've been living before. It will help us to clear the decks of everything that limits us. It will create in us this environment, this perfect soil for change, this perfect condition that will allow the possibility of a new direction forming in our life. And it's always fascinating to me that the definition of truth, serara in Aramaic, is a right or harmonious direction that gives a possibility for something new to occur. This is what we're doing. We're approaching the truth that makes us free that Jesus talks about. We're approaching the possibility of a new direction that didn't exist in us before because we didn't have the platform to even be able to see it, to understand that there's another there out there. When Jesus talks about the clear eye, right? The good eye, the clear eye, ayina bisha in Aramaic. He says, if your eye is clear, then your whole body will be full of light. There will be the illumination. There will be everything that will allow you to see past these imposed limitations, whether they are imposed by yourself or whether they are imposed by others, whether they're imposed unconsciously before you even had the ability to think in language. You can see past those limitations. You can see past those illusions. You can see past those constructs that you've made about yourself. And practicing these both pillars at the same time, amplifying the right brain experience, attenuating the left brain dominance, allows us to begin to answer those two core existential questions. Not intellectually, not in words, it doesn't work that way, but experientially. We will know what we know. Who am I? Any answer put into words has already stepped away from the truth. It could only be experienced in real time. And who are you, Lord? What is the source of everything? What is undergirding everything that is? You will know your place. You will know your purpose. You will know your meanings beneath language over time, just as we do the things that are tasked for us along the way. We will know these things within, not in our minds, within, among, and in the midst of everything and everyone that we experience along the way, which is exactly where Jesus says kingdom was, right? Not out there by experience, not out there by observation, but within, among, and in the midst of. And when we get to this point, in any given moment, we can choose kingdom. Let's pray. Father, you've given us this perfect way. There's a certain amount of understanding that we need, Lord, and help us with that. But most of the understanding we need is to jettison, to let go of everything that we think we already know about how to be spiritual people, how to be religious people, how to do good things, or how to obey rules. Help us to let go of all of that so that we can just be present to you at 3:30 in the morning, open, naked, undefended, and experience what we experience and see where that leads us. Help us to be willing to do that more and more. Help us to be willing to risk the things that we use to defend ourselves, even in personal relationships, even with people who are attacking us or we think they are. Allow us to be undefended, unoffendable, to see where that leads us, to see what experience ensues. This is it, Lord. This is everything it means to be human as you created us. And we want to know what that is. So help us through the difficult first steps. Help us overcome the resistance and the fear to experience the amazing, awe-inspiring quality of your kingdom. And thank you for being with us every step of the way. Never let us forget we can only love, only because you loved us first. And we pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen. Please stand.